the face of my conscience.
2024.
Coming to understand of
If
myself.
it's 7 o'clock on Saturday morning, it's
Clean out all
time for
the
This
old
Week in
cobwebs.
Waukesha on WAUK.
Clean out the old books
I'm your
from the
host,
shelf.
Downtown Donnie Brown,
Well, this song
coming
is
to you
inspired
live and
by
local
good
from the
man,
office
it's
of
you.
former Alderman Don Paul Brown here in the Walk Radio studios, right around the corner from Theodora Yaumans Park, where we are proud to honor our suffragette heritage here in the Shaw. And I am joined by Johnny on the board and on the jukebox. And I have really three guests. One of them is a co-host, and we'll put a pin in that for now. We'll introduce him momentarily. But last week, as you recall, my guests were challengers, if you will, candidates for the Waukesha School Board. Today, we are honored to have two incumbents up for re-election, Anthony Zenobia and Kelly Piacsek. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
Glad you could be here so early. And then to make sure that that this is a, shall we say, a fair, objective environment, I'm honored to have a very dear family friend, one of the leading scholars on American public policy, Dr. Robert Kaufman from Pepperdine University. Bob, how are you this morning?
I'm doing well. You were so desperate for a conservative, you had to get me on the West Coast to appear on the program, but I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Glad to have you, Bob. You know, I was texting brothers Raymond and Terry, two very good friends of Bob, and Ray got very upset that I would wake you up so early in the morning. But I explained to him that you're up at 4 your time anyway to hit the gym, correct?
Yeah, he knows that. He's just being mock sympathetic. He can't help it.
Terrific. So, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this is St. Patrick's Day weekend. So happy St. Patrick's Day to all of us who have of Irish descent, as well as those who choose to be Irish on this wonderful weekend. So, and I know that now includes you, Bob, right? After an ancestry test.
Thanks to Ancestry.com, I learned that my maternal grandmother grazed in other pastures, to use the words of Marie Chevalier. Yes.
Fantastic. So, and one of the proud Irish moments this week before we begin our discussions was at the Oscars when Cillian Murphy became the first Irish-born actor to win the Oscars. And for those of you who didn't catch it, because he kind of just at the very end of his acceptance speech after he dedicated his award to all the peacemakers in the age of Oppenheimer, he said a few words in Gaelic that very few people I think could catch, and it was Go Mila Mahagev, which means 1,000 thank yous. So if you hear me saying that a lot in this show, that's what that means. Go Mila Mahagev. So and more on other exciting things. So we have, as my friend James Sentel says, an ambitious but very achievable agenda. Of course, the focus here are our two candidates, incumbents seeking re-election. We're going to spend some time on the Carroll Minute, where we have an All-American, or should I say a repeat All-American here in our university city. We have some more high schoolers celebrating great success in state competition, not only here in Waukesha, but around Waukesha County. And some more voting information. We do have the election is April 2nd. And we're going to talk a little bit about National Reading Month. So, but first, some very important time-sensitive news is that at 10 a.m. this morning, Saturday, March 16th, at the Waukesha South Soccer Field, there will be an Easter egg hunt. So, and it's for kids ages birth to 8. So, sorry, Johnny, you and I are, we're not welcome in that regard. But it is presented by the Waukesha South Student Council. So, knowing how nice and spring-like the weather's been, that could be a fun thing for families to do. So keep that in mind. So, again, with our guests here on WAUK 101.1 FM, 540 AM, we have Anthony Zenobia, and I'm pronouncing your name correctly, right?
Yes, you are.
Terrific. And Kelly Piacsek, and I pronounced your name correctly, right?
Yep,
Fantastic. So let's start. Tell us about yourselves. Whoever wants to go first.
Well, I will go first. I appreciate you having us here on this fine Saturday morning. Hello, Professor Kaufman out there. I don't know if you've seen your sunset yet.
Not quite, but good morning.
All right.
Getting there, huh?
Yep.
In honor of St. Patty's Day, my son turns 8 tomorrow. So
Fantastic.
He's got some Irish on his mother's side, so he's
Terrific.
fully ready for green beer, I think. But no.
Terrific.
So yeah, as far as my background, I'm a father of 3, 12, 10, and 8. Lived here, grew up here, just maybe 10 minutes west. My father moved here for a job in manufacturing in 75. So family of 6 kids, and they've lived in the area. My wife and I moved back into the city and where we currently live back in 2010. So I enjoy a lot of things. I enjoy to get out and in the outdoors is probably one of my favorite things. Own my own business. I work in, mainly buying and selling equipment for manufacturing, metal fabrication, metalworking, is what I've been keeping busy with for, on my own, probably 8 years, but probably been in that industry about 20 years. And before that, consulting, financial services. So, glad to be here and glad to talk about all the wonderful things happening on the Waukesha School Board.
Sounds great. Thanks, Anthony. Kelly, your turn.
Good morning. Thank you for having us. I've been in Wisconsin since I started at Marquette University, so quite some time. Once I got here, I didn't want to leave. But I grew up in Northern Illinois. My family owned a family service station.
Oh, wow.
So I grew up around cars and pumping gas and doing minor car repairs and things like that. So went to public school and Catholic school, so I had a combination of both. And neither of my parents are college educated, just built an incredible family enterprise there in Illinois. And
that's great.
Came to Marquette. I studied biomedical engineering. I have my PhD in biomedical engineering from Marquette and the Medical College of Wisconsin. And I've been working in healthcare product development and healthcare research for the last 25 years. So it's really been my passion and probably explains a lot of my personality. But
Sure.
I have 3 kids in the district as well. We have 3 teenagers that all attend.
And I saw 2 of them play basketball, JV and varsity for Waukesha North. And
lots of athletes.
Very competitive, good play, great shooters.
Yep.
That's for dangerous from the 3-point line. That's for sure. So you should be very proud. That's terrific. Hey, can I ask, because I lived in Chicagoland for like almost 20 years. What town did you grow up in?
Rockford, Illinois.
Oh, Rockford. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sounds great. So a little further out west.
A little further. It's about 100 miles from here. A little fun fact, my parents run a national level BMX track in Rockford, Illinois. So anybody who's related to the BMX sport around here has probably been there. And they've been doing that for over 40 years.
Okay. And it's And Bob, if I remember correctly, I believe you're a Cheap Trick fan. They're from Rockford, Illinois. I don't know if you knew that or not.
They are.
No, I'm a Beach Boys guy.
Yeah, Bob's a big Beach Boys guy. So, well, we'll be talking more about that later. I should have, Bob, I have to apologize. I didn't pick out any Beach Boys songs in my my repertoire today. So, but we'll have to have you back on again. We could have a focused Beach Boys show just for you.
Well, why don't you see how today goes before you make a reckless commitment?
Fair enough. So, but one quick story in Rockford too was we used to have a show on that's now been replaced by Matt and Air on Air. But at the end of the kind of the title sequence, you would hear "Hello, Wisconsin," which is also in that '70s show. And where that comes from, and I learned it here in civic media, is that when the Cheap Trick would play a lot of concerts in Wisconsin because they weren't, they were still like high school age. And you couldn't, the drinking age in Illinois was 21, but in Wisconsin it was 18 for many years. And so they would do a lot of concerts just north of the border there. And that's how they would start every show by "Hello, Wisconsin." And they'd probably have a couple sodas in them, to help them along the way. So, but terrific. So I appreciate you both sharing your personal upbringings and backgrounds. How have these experiences helped make you better in your work and or inspired you to be school board members?
I'll start with that. I mean, my parents, not having a college education, they were really focused on making sure that we had the best pathway to whatever was next. And we had a lot of family friends who were in the trades, and so there were so many paths. We had respect for every different career path, and so that really keeps my mind very open to what all is out there for kids. Not everybody has to go to college, but you need to learn the core skills to be successful. And I think growing up in a service oriented business, and also being an engineer, focusing on problem solving, but also, being there present with the person that's in front of you. I think a lot of times we get so wrapped up in technology and devices and not interacting with people. But at the end of the day, the person that's in front of you is the person that you should be engaging with. And so that really has influenced some of what I've seen over the last 15 years or so with how education has evolved, and really trying to get back to that hands-on learning, hands-on doing things, and being prepared for whatever path you have in front of you. Like I said, not everybody's going to choose the more traditional path. So
Sure. How about you, Anthony?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me is probably family. I mean, I grew up with 4 brothers and a sister. My father was, the primary breadwinner, so my mother raised us. And just the sense of how important that is to have the stability and the security of 2 people that are married for 57 years, dedicating, sacrificing, working for their family. And so when I found my wife, amazing as she is, we knew we wanted children. We knew we wanted to raise them in a community like Waukesha. So that thrust of saying, hey, this is what's important. I've always followed politics in life. I've always been an observer of what's going on. But when the opportunity presented itself, when schooling got tough during COVID, it said, hey, maybe it's time for me to get involved in that. So
sounds good. We're going to continue this conversation with Anthony Zenobia and Kelly Piacsek, incumbents on the school board, as well as give Professor Robert Kaufman a chance to tell us about his background and especially his educational background and why he's here today. As This Week in Waukesha continues.
My heart is calling you.
WAUK 540 AM. And that is a great band from Chicago called Solace. One of their band members, the great John Williams, not the John Williams of movie fame, but an accomplished musician in his own right in All Ireland and other awarded, highly decorated concertina player, and he plays other instruments. And John's family's from the same part of Ireland in the west in County Clare as my family, my father's family, and my mother's family too. And I mention this because there's a great movie out now, and Bob, you would enjoy this. It's called The Job of Song, and it chronicles musicians in County Clare, in the wee village of Doolin on the coast. Beautiful, down just down the road from where my father's family's from. And one of the musicians is a guy named Owen O'Neill, who was invited to play in Chicago when I was managing an Irish pub there, and met Owen back in the 90s. We've remained good friends through Facebook ever since. So Owen O'Neill's included in that movie, as well as Luca Bloom, another accomplished artist. So that's my idea of having a great St. Patrick's Day, not the green beer and all the other shenanigans. But so Bob Kaufman, my guests again, are Waukesha School Board incumbents, Anthony Zenobia and Kelly Piacsek. And then my moderator, all the way from the left coast, Professor Robert Kaufman of Pepperdine University. Bob, if you don't, for the benefit of our local listeners here, tell us about yourself.
I'm an example of downward mobility. My income goes down after each degree. I have too much education. My parents were educators. My mother, a very successful AP history teacher in a parochial school. My father was an elementary school principal in Sharon, Massachusetts, very successful, excellent school system. And as for me, I hope you have the rest of the show. I have 4 degrees from Columbia, including a PhD in political science, a law degree from Georgetown, and an advanced law degree in alternative dispute resolution from Pepperdine.
Wow.
Sort of an antidote because most of my writing has to do with the use of force, usually advocating it. So that's my educational background in a nutshell. And I want to commend both of these candidates for running because you're running really at a pivotal time. Whatever your position, I think one thing is clear. COVID really took the scab off what's happening in American education. And it has made parents much more disturbed and much more engaged. So I think that's one issue. And also, from my end of it, at the university end, and I'm not singling out public schools because the private school kids aren't much better. There's been a real deterioration in civic education, basic skills, English literacy, expertise in the STEM subjects. And my parents were exponents of the liberal arts. And one of the reasons is that a liberal arts education gives you the ability to learn for your lifetime. And as you know, in the upper Midwest, you've learned the hard way. These students are going to have to retool many times in their lives. This is not going to be like working at GM or Ford for 40 years. And so one of my concerns, and I think parents are concerned, are the schools aware of the absolute imperative of improving skills and improving the capacity of students, not just to learn from K through 12, but for a lifetime.
Excellent. Go ahead. Do you want to respond to that?
Well, absolutely. I very impressed to hear all of your background, Professor Kaufman. It's interesting. I think you said something in there about some of your degree pointing you toward the use of force, and I know that's been a subject that some others have written about. I think Heather McDonald comes to mind, but very, very important in our current state and politics in this country, and on what's important. How do we tackle some of the issues around rising crime and some of the issues that we've recently have happened with how we treat our police forces, and so all very important. That's kind of what thrust me into running for school board was COVID. My oldest son was 2 years at Rose Glen. When my daughter was ready for school, we decided, we wanted to send our kids to a smaller school where they also got some education in Christianity and in values of the local parochial school. So that's how we were raised. That's the type of schools we went to. So we wanted that for our children. But COVID affected every school, and a lot of the decisions that were made at the local level were just that. If the local school board's doing something, all the other schools follow suit. So that kind of engaged me to go into that. It really was. Look, we all know our education system's been in trouble for a long time, and I really do feel like, looking at other options, teaching kids how to think rather what to think, having them look toward the future of, hey, I'm going to go into the workforce, I'm going to go into college. How am I going to transition either through that career and or into something else as I go along. Because you're right, no one's going to work 40 years in a manufacturing facility, probably in the foreseeable future. So
Sure. Kelly, how about you?
Yeah, very impressed with Dr. Kaufman's background, and I completely agree that the scab coming off is something that we all as parents kind of experience in different ways. But when you're faced with your kids learning from home and trying to understand how to support them and how to help them, I think like a lot of us went along thinking that our kids were just doing okay, and you're looking at how your child's doing, and you think that the time at school is well spent, and but you do start to hear things along the way and see things, and forms come home or projects come home or book assignments and things, and then you start to question, well, is this going to contribute to your education, or is this something that has a different intent? And so just starting to ask questions. And I mean, for me, it started all the way back in 2010 when my oldest started school. Common Core was all the rage, right? And as parents, we were looking at that saying, what is this? How are we supposed to get our kids through this, and what does it mean for them? So I think it's been a long time coming, but I think over the last 4 years has really been where we've been exposed to some things we need to think differently about.
That's great. We're going to continue this conversation with Kelly Piacsek and Anthony Zenobia, incumbent candidates for Waukesha School Board in the April 2nd election, as well as our moderator, Professor Robert Kaufman, and the Carroll Minute, and so much more. My guest next week is chiropractor Daytona Crepo. Here in This Week in Waukesha on WAUK, 540 AM, 101.1 FM, and the Civic Media app.
Where is this place we've come to? We don't know what to say. We long to see each other and are frightened of that day. You met me in a barren place. You walked me to the hill. We were so good for each other then. I know we could be still. You couldn't have come at a better time. You couldn't have come at a better time. You couldn't have come at a better time.
Happy St. Patrick's Day weekend here in This Week in Waukesha, and you're listening to Luca Bloom. You couldn't have come at a better time. Another great Irishman, younger brother of Christy Moore, a famous Irish folk singer. And I forgot to mention for Robert Kaufman's benefit, the second song you heard was Les Paul and Mary Ford, The World is Waiting for the Sunrise. And Bob, were you aware that Waukesha is the home of Les Paul?
I did know that.
Fantastic. All right. So it's designated by Gibson Guitars as one of 8 Guitar Town USAs based on the influence of the guitar. And so you have like what are some of the cities? You know, all the big cities: L.A., Chicago, obviously like Memphis and Nashville, and these big cities are familiar to most of the people. And then Waukesha, Wisconsin, home of Les Paul. So a lot of fun here. I am joined again by Anthony Zenobia and Kelly Piacsek, incumbent candidates for reelection to the Waukesha School Board, and that election's on April 2nd. And just for everyone's benefit, I mentioned this on last week's show. Absentee voting starts on Tuesday, March 19th, and runs through Friday the 22nd from 8 to 4:30. Monday, March 25th through Thursday, March 28th, 8 to 4:30. And then Friday, the last day for early voting, March 29th, from 8 to 5 p.m. So if you can't get there on Election Day, take advantage of that. And also look for any postcards you get in the mail if you have a new polling place. If you're unsure, be sure to call City Hall. Call my good friend Gina Kozlik, who I learned is leaving. I guess she's going to Dousman, so sorry to see her go. She's been excellent in her role as city clerk. And also, too, her team have made sure we've had great and fair elections here in Waukesha. A really well-organized team throughout all the different polling places. So keep that in mind. And first question out of the gate for our candidates is, And we'll start with you, Kelly. What would you say have been your biggest achievements in your recent term on the board?
Definitely the curricular resources that we've implemented. I mean, we've got so many things to be proud of. We've got a balanced budget. We've done a ton of improvements without having to go to referendum. I think the financial piece is great, but I'm really most proud of the work that we've done on curriculum. When I came onto the board, and I saw this with my own kids, there wasn't consistency from school to school. There weren't great transitions from elementary to middle to high school. So just having that evidence-based curriculum that's sequenced, that makes sense in terms of how kids learn, science-based, that's been a big lift for us. We've implemented 11 curricular resources that are multi-grade level, and then another 14 or 15 individual courses that we've replaced the curriculum in. So all told, we've probably spent about $6 million on new curriculum for the district, and that also helps us from school to school, right? We want every kid at every school in the district to have access to the same quality of curriculum. So I feel like that's been just time well spent, and will make a big impact on our academic outcomes over time.
Terrific. And before we get to Anthony, just want to remind we're taking your calls this morning at 855-752-4842. That's 855-752-4842. And if you happen to be catching this show on the radio, 540 AM or 101.1 FM, you can also catch us on the go by downloading the Civic Media app. And you can take it within. Civic Media has over 20 stations around the state. So for those of you who like to travel or have places up north, great place to catch local programming, as well as Brewers, Badgers, Packer games out in that area. Great. I love sports on the radio, so just keep that in mind. And I know Bob Kaufman does. But so Anthony, what would you say have been Anthony Zenobia? What would you say have been your biggest achievements in your recent term on the board? This is your only. You've been on one term, correct?
Yes.
Then Cal, how many terms have you been on? One. Okay, so each one term. Okay, so go ahead, sir.
Yes. So I really feel that what we've accomplished, what I ran on, is what I'm proud of. I kept the promises to the people that I spoke to in the community about what I wanted to do, what I felt was important. Going back to have to rehash COVID again, but that was the central theme of the 21 election, was getting kids back to school, putting them back into the environment that they used to be in, where they weren't constantly being quarantined. So the big issues were getting our kids back to school, which in Waukesha, our secondary kids were in a hybrid program, which had ended just prior to us getting elected in the winter. So that was on the change, but we were still quarantining kids who were coming in contact. And before you know it, 5, 10, 15 kids in a class are at home for 2 weeks. In addition to that, it was the masking. So when we came on, those were kind of the first two orders of business. Kelly was the one who called an emergency meeting to end the quarantining policy and keep kids in the classroom who were not sick. A couple weeks later, I made the motion to end the masking, mandatory masking, when we made it optional. So those are two huge things that the community was dying to have happen and wanted to see happen. That really was the thrust of us winning that election in 21. I really believe parents wanted their kids back to school. They wanted them learning, and they wanted a lot of these mandates that were hurting their education, both at home and in school. After that, the two things that I really ran on was, let's depoliticize the environment of schools. And a lot of that stuff that was in the schools and still is a distraction to learning. And I truly believe if we're not educating kids properly, how will they ever be able to engage, like we had said earlier, in the civic process? So it's really was bringing a balance to the environment that kids learn in, to not have it overly political. And of course, there's other issues of that, one being inappropriate materials, but I think we'll get to that soon. So.
Okay. I want to interject real quick that the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin launched its vote411.org voter guide for the April 2nd spring election. It's a good chance for you to check out other elections going on. I know there's not many this time here in Waukesha, as well as the candidates in our school board. Next question, and we want to give Professor Kaufman a chance to weigh in on this, is because it is a national issue, and that's we have a teacher shortage. And what would your plan be? What will your plan be in your next term should you be reelected for attracting teachers to Waukesha School District? Whoever wants to go first?
Well, let's maybe just start by talking about the situation that we have here in Waukesha, and I think where we need to have our focus. I know there's been a common narrative that there's a mass exodus. I think the entire industry has seen a significant turnover. The resignations and retirements over the last few years have been unprecedented. I think the state of Wisconsin is close to 16%. In Waukesha, we've actually been hovering around 10 or 11%. So we've actually retained more teachers on average than most districts, which has been a positive. We onboarded 140 plus teachers this year. We've been able to fill those positions. We have a lot of incredibly talented teachers who want to work in Waukesha, and we've got a great mentor program. So that's actually been going very well. I think the challenge across the industry is that there just aren't enough teachers. And, people talk about things like tuition forgiveness and, non-traditional pathways and things. And it's not enough to just have a financial solution. We really need to have different paths for people to come into the profession. We need to have people who have other degrees. There are some emergency paths, and those do work in some cases. But I think there are some really interesting proposals out there around apprenticeship type programs where, teachers who want to be in the classroom don't want to spend 4 years sitting in a classroom being taught to. They want to be in the classroom. So I think the sooner that we can get teachers into the classroom through apprenticeships, through mentoring experiences, the better. And then also, considering that you need a 4-year education degree to teach, second grade math. What is it about the foreign language requirement in your college program that's going to help you be a good elementary teacher? So I think just understanding, what are we asking of teachers to come into the profession, and where do we find some more non-traditional pathways into the profession?
Sure. Professor Kaufman, what are your thoughts on addressing
Well,
the teacher
I've
shortage?
had a lot of experience in this, unfortunately, and it's a multifaceted problem. One, you have to pay teachers better. But secondly, teachers have to be more accountable. I am for tenure. I have it, but one of the degrees I got was very late in life. I was over 60 and got the advanced law degree, and my children really inspired me to do it. They told me, "Dad, you have no idea what it's like being a student these days." And I said, "Sure I do. I've been in the classroom. My parents were educators." They said, "Dad, you don't know what you're talking about." As usual, they were correct. And one of the things I learned being a student and deliberately not asking for preferential treatment, there are some very good teachers and there are some very bad teachers. And part of teaching and improving it is making the teacher, if you're going to reward teachers, you have to make it accountable. The third problem is, unfortunately, the lot that education schools and teachers unions have on access to being a teacher. It's like a medieval guild. One of the emblematic cases was in the state of New Jersey. Henry Kissinger wouldn't have been allowed to teach in a high school because he didn't have an ed degree in process. We have to be able to hire more people in mid-career who have an expertise in a subject. This is certainly true for K through 3. I get the process emphasis, but for the upper levels, particularly 5th grade on, we need more people who are in teaching who have substantive knowledge. And then finally, we need a better legal environment. Every day I walk into my office at Pepperdine and I have an endowed chair, I half joke with our administrative assistant, is there a Title IX against me today? And one of the things that teachers have to deal with, particularly if you're on my side of the spectrum, is sort of the weaponization that really not only chills learning, but is a real barrier to entry for teachers. And honestly, one of the reasons teachers are retiring in droves is the same reason that policemen are retiring in droves. They find the atmosphere demoralizing, and they have a point. But part of it is also that teachers have to be more accountable. If teachers want rewards, nobody functions well without accountability, me included.
Excellent point. Thank you, Professor. Johnny, how we doing on time here? Okay. Yep. So 1 minute, I want to make a quick announcement for the second this is for Carroll University. For the second consecutive season, Carroll Jr. Olivia Rangel has been named to the Women's Basketball Coaches Association Division III All-American Honorable Mention Team. This announcement came on Wednesday, the day after she was named to the D3 Hoops All-Regional First Team. And congrats to her teammate, sophomore Natalie Grisius, for being named second team All-Region. It really was a wonderful year for Carroll Women's. They had the highest ranking, 13th in program history, national ranking, and the most wins in program history with 23, and also capturing the regular season and tournament championships for the first time. So we will return with Kelly Piacsek and Anthony Zenobia, and as This Week in Waukesha continues, and my good friend, Professor Robert Kaufman.
Of the right thing at the wrong time.
726 Bible.
You're listening to The Shaw, WAUK.
You couldn't have come at a better time. Since we were first together by the lakeside sky so blue, we were so good for each other. Me and you and me and you and me and you and me.
You're listening to This Week in Waukesha on WAUK, 540 AM, 101.1 FM, and the Civic Media app. My apologies. We're moving to a new 800 number, and it doesn't appear to be working today. We will have a 414 number available for you momentarily. In fact, it's on the bottom of the WAUKradio.com website. So, again, our apologies as we sort that out, but we do want to take your calls. Anthony wanted to talk more about the addressing the teacher shortage. Is that correct, Anthony Zenobia?
Yeah, I wanted to just briefly respond to what Professor Kaufman had said. I think he's absolutely right on most of those points. And some of the issues that we've had to address, I know there's a narrative that wants to say, well, the school board has done a lot of things we don't like, so a lot of teachers have left. And there's probably a few of those for sure. But we've had 141 that do want to work with Waukesha and have come into the district. I think there's a sense among teachers, as in any profession, that they want to work in an environment that is about the work they do. We know our teachers are passionate about all this stuff. They want to work with kids, and they don't want the distractions. Some great things about our district, and Kelly mentioned about all the curriculum we have put in. I think that really begins, that curriculum had gone in across all grade levels. And when you have new teachers, whether they're brand new teachers or they've been teaching for a long time, they come in and they're able to, step into curriculums that are proven, that they can get on board with quickly and begin to teach without trying to pick up things that are another teacher had done that's no longer there. Our teachers' salaries in this state for the size of our district are in the top 7%. And so we certainly pay our teachers well because we value our teachers. But again, back to the bureaucracy of the state. I mean, why Wisconsin is ranked so low in education is baffling. And one of the only things that I can think of is the problem is that we have a Department of Public Instruction. We have a state government that puts too much regulation and restriction on how we can educate our kids. The sooner we can remedy some of those situations, I think the more teachers will attract across the board. But our population is also aging out. It's affected other things like transportation for one. So
Okay. Hey, real quick, the number to call in, and again, our apologies, is 414-441-2941. That's 414-441-2941. And it looks like someone got through, Johnny. Is that right? Tom, are you there? Or we might have lost him. Oh, no, we got, looks like Susie. Susie, are you there? Hello, Susie. I'm not getting anything from Susie's end here.
It's like fishing.
Yeah.
I'm here.
Oh, here we go.
Hello.
Hi, Susie. Yes, thank you. What's on your mind?
Good morning, Mr. Zenobia, Dr. Piacsek, Mr. Brown, and hello, Mr. Kaufman. Welcome to the Waukesha area.
Thank you. Good morning.
I want to thank you. Good morning. I want to thank you for taking my call. There is so much positive activity and great news coming out of our Waukesha schools.
Whoop, I think we might have lost Susie again. So, well, actually, we got another caller. We got Mike. Mike, can you hear us? Or Mike, what's on your mind, buddy?
Hey, Don, it's Mike, your friend.
Yes,
Okay,
it is.
so happy
Good
be
to
able call
hear
in.
your voice. Yeah. Hey, thanks for putting this together too, Mike. Mike had a big hand in this.
Yeah,
So,
no problem.
so
Yeah, no problem. So I actually kind of want to address something Dr. Kaufman said about peeling the scab off. And I remember in Waukesha where the scab was peeled off, it was actually during COVID that there was an open records request that actually was sent to the district, and it was the district actually charged $531 to get the information that should have been free. And that information actually exposed the failure rates at all of our high schools. And when that got out, and it got out in the media, there was other parents around the state then that actually took action and tried to get the same type of information. And it was so damning to the school districts that actually the price kept going up, $1,000, $2,000. It got up to like $10,000. And what I want to do is I would like our candidates there to actually kind of talk about some of the successes in math and the core curricula that Waukesha has actually done since then, because it's so important. Because, as you know, there's so much misinformation out there, and I think they're doing great. But I got to hang up because I'm going into work, and I appreciate you letting
sounds
them on.
great. Hey, thanks for the call, Mike. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Go ahead, Kelly or Anthony. Or
Yeah, I'll start with that. I was part of the parent group that was really asking a lot of questions about how our kids were doing, and we could see that that they weren't prepared for the tests. They weren't meeting the standards. There just wasn't a lot of learning happening. And so on a positive note, I think that the threshold wasn't lowered because the kids weren't learning, but the grades were abysmal. And so we started asking questions about how it was going, and we're really kind of surprised that it was going to cost a lot of money to understand how our kids were doing. What we learned is that people really weren't paying attention. Those in the district side weren't paying attention to how the kids were doing, which was kind of shocking. But once we looked at that data, when I decided to run for school board, it was very much on, returning some normalcy, but also getting back to this learning recovery as fast as we possibly could. And then digging into the curriculum and seeing what we had to do to get it better. The challenge is that when you have 3 disrupted years for kids, it's not like you're starting over again with a whole bunch of new curriculum. You're starting from where you are. So the time that it takes to actually recover when you've got a 5th grader who's lost, 2 years of very foundational learning, is that it's really hard to catch up. You can't just throw new curriculum at it. But the first step is having science-based, sequenced, structured curriculum that's going to work. And we've already seen some really great outcomes in our elementary schools. I think a lot of our high schoolers have recovered to a good level. I think the challenge we have right now, it's fundamentally is at middle school, because the kids who are in middle school right now missed some really formative time in elementary school, from academics and behavior and social engagement. And so that's the biggest challenge. But at the elementary level, social studies, math, reading have all seen a significant improvement over the last few years in terms of outcomes, and our improvement has actually outpaced what's happening at the state level. So we're moving in the right direction.
Sounds great. And Susie's back. We can fit you in real quick, or if you don't mind hanging on. Susie, are you there? Okay. Hey, Susie, let's.
Hello.
Yes.
Now can you hear?
We sure can. Yep. Actually,
Okay,
Susie, can I put you on hold here? We're going to move into the second hour, but we want to hear your question here on This Week in Waukesha with my guests, Anthony Zenobia and Kelly Piacsek, incumbent candidates for the Waukesha School Board.
Traffic on the interstates. This is The Shaw, 540 AM and 101.1 FM, WAUK. Traffic.
St. Patrick's Day Eve 2024. If it's 8 o'clock on Saturday morning, it's still time for This Week in Waukesha. I'm your host, Don Brown. I'm joined by Johnny on the board and on the jukebox, where he'll be singing about a thing called Love later. And we're coming to you live and local from the office of former Alderman Don Paul Brown here in the WAUK studios, right around the corner from Theodore Yeomans Park, where we are proud to honor our suffragette heritage here in the Shaw. And before we take Susie's call, question for you. And last week's guest, your opponents didn't get this right either, so don't be. Can you tell me who Theodore Yeomans was?
Yes, she was the lady who actually lived where Les Paul Middle School is now.
Really?
Right?
Okay, I didn't know that part. Yeah.
Yep. So I don't know her whole life story. Actually, are you going to tell us?
She was the president of the women's suffrage movement, and a Carroll graduate, a reporter for the Freeman, and she's one of the big reasons why Wisconsin, and I don't know if you know this, Professor Kaufman, Wisconsin was the first state to ratify the 19th Amendment. And I only learned that because when I was on the city council, Mayor Riley did a proclamation on September 19th was the anniversary in 2019. So I'd like to give her a big shout out. And there's just so much great local history, too. I want to celebrate it. And my guest a couple weeks ago was John Shane Connect, a middle school art teacher from Butler Middle School, who became our unofficial historian of Waukesha history, probably the foremost expert on the Springs era. But if you get a chance, check out my podcast page on WAUK Radio for This Week in Waukesha, and it's really worth listening to. It's just so many great nuggets of Waukesha history, which led to more. So we're going to have John on again. From that conversation, I didn't realize. So we knew the first forward pass took place in Waukesha in college at Carroll University. But also, the guy that invented the individual yard line markers came from Waukesha. Hartle Field was the first field, high school, college, or pro to have the individual yard lines, and Wisconsin was the first college team. And then this guy, whoever invented it, sold that to the NFL and to the college ranks. And I only knew that because John, after the show, had sent over a couple articles on. We were trying to find out the origins of the Waukesha South Black Shirt nickname. So, but. Anyway, my guests again are Anthony Zenobia and Kelly Piacsek, incumbent candidates, Waukesha School Board. And Susie, you've been so patient. Thank you. What's your question?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me on the show, and thank you for taking my call. I'm going to start again. There's so much positive activity and great news coming out of Waukesha schools. I would like to thank you for all you have done and will continue to do when reelected. My question is, the advancements of the trades is very important to me. What are some of the things that Waukesha schools are doing to build the trades education program?
Great question. Thank you. Who would like to go first?
I can start with that. Part of when I originally ran, I think it's probably still something that really needs to be taken into a second term or taken forward by the board, is to extend the visibility of a lot of the programs that we already have within the district that steer kids towards the trades. We have the Engineering Academy and the Health Professionals Academy at South. We're getting more involved with our STEM programs with local manufacturers in what's called the MAID program. And I think it's really important to begin to transition some of the student population who does not want to go directly into college, into a 4-year college, to have them go toward the jobs that are available, that are well-paying, that give them a career path and a path back to higher education as they learn. There's so many high-paying jobs in my in my profession, I hear every time I walk into a shop or a plant that, hey, we could use a welder, we could use a fabricator. In every part of the industry, they need people. They want to teach people what they're doing. They have apprenticeships. They want to get kids engaged. These are extremely well-paying jobs, all over Waukesha, all over Wisconsin. So that's very important. I think we need to make those programs more visible. We need to recruit more kids into thinking that that's an option for them to go into. And there's already a great foundation in Waukesha to do that. So it's a great springboard.
Terrific. How about you, Kelly?
I'll add a couple quick things. We have these district level key performance indicators that we put in place a couple years ago because we really wanted metrics that would drive the right behaviors. And one of those was involvement in the career and technical education path and dual enrollment. So we've seen a tremendous growth in our dual credit enrollment, in our certifications and industry recognized credentials that students can actually earn through co-listing courses with high school and with college and technical colleges. We have the largest investment with WCTC for our high school students. We're paying for courses at UW, and a lot of that is designed to contribute to certificates. So I think to what Anthony said, we have incredible opportunities for kids in manufacturing and automotive and healthcare. The challenge and the opportunity, I think, is just to make sure that we communicate that. And that gets back to what I was saying about middle school earlier, too. We can't start too early. Kids start making decisions about what electives they want to take and where they want to be down the road. They make those decisions in 7th and 8th grade. So we need to get that message to them as soon as possible, help them understand what paths are available. I mean, how great to be able to get a technical degree or a professional certification and be able to work your way through that next level, whatever it is that you're going to do next. So if I could just share real quick, too, last week, Thursday, I was able to go to Waukesha South. There was a lunch on embedded agriculture. And so I think another thing the district does really well is to integrate different concepts across the curriculum. So the chef foods and the cooking classes were working together with the hydroponics and all the embedded agriculture. And so it was just really cool to see, them put a menu together and do a lot of organic related meal preparation. So that's just a great example of how all those pieces can really be integrated to curriculum and prepare kids for what's next.
Sounds great. And my co-host, Professor Robert Kaufman, what are your thoughts on the vocations, the trades, and how we can do it?
Yeah, we need much more of that, and these are good-paying jobs. We need electricians. One of the I think problems of student debt forgiveness is it's neglected the tradespeople. My daughter's significant other, wonderful guy, is an electrician, and he said, "Hey, Bob, I could have used some help for my 150 truck for my business rather than taking some esoteric subject at a university where the kids were advised based on malpractice and they came out of school unemployable." So bravo to anything that emphasizes vocational education. We need what COVID illustrated is the world could live very well without the diversity deans. There are more of them on my campus than Ayatollahs in Tehran. What you can't live without plumbers, right, tradesmen, electrician, the people who deliver your food, the people at the grocery store that stock your food. We've really neglected what Victor Davis Hanson calls muscular labor, and anything that redresses that neglect is all to the good.
Sounds good. Thanks, Bob. Next question. How is the district preparing for the implementation of Wisconsin Act 20? And for your benefit, Dr. Kaufman, it's an early literacy education law that by January of 2025, all schools are required to teach phonics and other best practices to ensure that kids can read by third grade. Who'd like to go first?
I would love to go first.
Kelly.
We're in a really good place on Act 20. Something just to give some historical perspective. We implemented a new phonics program a couple of years ago. We've implemented a really incredible new writing program last year, and these are all part of these investments that we're making in evidence-based curriculum on the basis of the science of reading. So Act 20 it's unfortunate that it's necessary, right? We have so much variety in how kids are learning how to read, and a lot of it is based on this concept called 3Qing, where you're really trying to understand the context of the word and not actually learn how to read the word. So it was time to be really clear about the fact that that's not effective. And in my work, I spend a lot of time trying to understand how the brain works and how humans respond to different things. And so it's pretty clear that a science-based approach that's advocated for in Act 20 makes sense. So on a positive note, we already have a lot of the building blocks in place. We were working toward implementing that comprehensive literacy program. And so we're on track. We're in a really good place. I think, like anything else, when you have, whether it be state or federal level government saying, thou shalt do this, and we're going to tell you that you have to do it, and then we might tell you how to do it, we might not, and we might change,
Sure.
The decisions made at the state level are just taking too long. And what I think a lot of districts are doing is they're kind of waiting for those decisions so they know how to pay for these things. We don't have that challenge necessarily because we have some of the pieces in place already. We're going to do what makes sense. We're going to continue with that science of reading strategy that we've had. But there are some things that are just, there's bureaucracy at the state level between the legislators and the DPI, and they just need to stop fighting about all of this and let us implement it so that we can get our kids to reading again.
Sounds great. We're going to give Anthony Zenobia a chance to talk about Act 20, but want to remind everybody, next Saturday, March 23rd, at Carroll University Stackner Ballroom from 10 to 12, the Chi Omega sorority is co-sponsoring the Waffles for Wishes to benefit Make-A-Wish Foundation. Again, in addition to breakfast, there will be raffles and silent auctions, and the proceeds will help a 13-year-old boy named Mason make his wish come true, which is meeting YouTuber Mystic 7. So much more to talk about here with my incumbent candidates, Kelly Piacsek and Anthony Zenobia, and my co-host moderator, Professor Robert Kaufman of Pepperdine, as This Week in Waukesha continues.
Clean out the old books from the shelf. Well, this song is inspired by a good man and his Jew. Doing good for others, sing Amazing Grace to you, yeah. It doesn't really matter if you're all jumbled up inside, as long as you know that love is endless and the world is wide. As long as you know.
Listen Together, Inc. You're listening to The Shaw, WAUK, Waukesha's home for Matt and Air on Air. Together.
Well, me, I was once their age. Once I was young, but I know I had my family to fall back on. Give it up. Share it.
FM and the Civic Media app. And we are taking your calls, 414-441-2941. But I want to give Anthony Zenobia a chance to talk about the plan for Act 20, I believe that is. But also, I want to lead into the next question. I want to thank Anthony for reminding me. It is National Reading Month. And so this will be two parts for you, and then we'll have Kelly. So after you answer Act 20, I want to hear about what you're reading now, but also what favorite book you had in your youth that inspired you.
Okay.
So go ahead. Act 20 first.
Yeah, Act 20. What I think I'm really proud about is that we're a little bit ahead of the curve on Act 20. So a lot of what Kelly said, I don't want to rehash that, but the district had already moved back toward phonics. I think it was in 2021. My son attended Rose Glen, his kindergarten and first grade year, and was not available then. So that was a change that was already occurring. But as we began to integrate all these new curriculums, we're already ahead of that curve in getting reading and literacy back into the elementary level. Another thing that we did and we pushed for on the board was when the COVID money came out, they only required that you spend 20% of that money on education, recovery, getting kids back into the classroom, catching them up. And we really we pushed to get more, and we were nearly 40% of that money we spent on curriculum. So we're well ahead of that. We have great people working on how to implement Act 20. We just had that in front of the Teaching and Learning Committee. So, but yeah, Eric Brooks would be a great resource to talk to if he's able.
Eric is the other candidate, the fifth
correct.
candidate for the school board, and we've extended an invitation through his campaign website for us to join me on next week's show along with Dr. Daytona.
That's
Kribo.
right.
So
He's
we
right.
hope he'll
He's
be able
got
to join us.
Yeah, he's got a lot of great insight
Sure.
into that particular. As far as the question was on reading and kind of what inspired me, I think as a kid I remember reading a lot of C.S. Lewis.
Yeah,
that was obviously a lot of great books that he wrote. I just bought my daughter the Laura Ingalls Wilder series. She's 10 and she's getting really interested in reading, but
I probably have it at home. I could have given it to you.
Oh, I didn't. Yeah, it wasn't that expensive, but so a lot of great insight into Wisconsin back in the day. The
Mrs. Engels was from
days.
Brookfield.
That's right.
Yeah.
So very very interesting. But what kind of inspired me to want to learn and read was just what was going on in the country at the time. The end of the Reagan administration, this contrast between America and the Soviet Union, what made us unique? Why was there such a contrast? And I wanted to understand why America was doing things right. And it's kind of counterintuitive. It got me to read books in economics. Economics in One Lesson was a great book in high school that just simplified a lot of that stuff.
And I want to interject too. I'm glad you mentioned the Reagan era and the Cold Wars. I gave a public comment at City Council. It's probably my first return since leaving, and it was about Hillcrest Park, where there was an initial commitment to. For your benefit, Bob Kaufman, Hillcrest was there was a Nike missile base there, and there has been an effort by our Parks Department to save a lot of that metal and make a pavilion for special events, concerts, parties, weddings, as well as an outdoor Cold War museum experience. And it seems like that's been put on hold. And granted, there was COVID. There was a little project involving bringing Lake Michigan water, but I'd really love to see that project finished because it's modeled after other Nike missile bases in Chicago that have been very successful and could be a major attraction. But the point I'm getting back to, but my school board incumbent candidates, is that I don't think there's enough Cold War history being taught, or helping people remember that. Professor Kaufman, I know you want to weigh in on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually a Cold War historian, and I'm on the advisory board of the Reagan Library, and I was the historical consultant for the Air Force One project at the library, which has been the most popular national exhibit at presidential libraries. And one of the reasons they did it, and one of the reasons they did it the way they did it, is no one really understands what the Cold War was about and how it ended, and that it wasn't just a misunderstanding. We won it because we fought it. And I also suggested, and they agreed, that there was a special room, a tribute to the victims of communism. According to the Black Book of Communism, this is in Fox News. This is Harvard University Press. 2 Frenchmen edited it. Communism's responsible for murdering 100 million people in the 20th century. Mm-hmm. So when we won the Cold War, and we won it without having to fight a kinetic war, for all our mistakes, that is an extraordinary accomplishment that we can't take for granted. as we face increasingly perilous times right now. This is why we study history, to see how to evaluate leaders and to make sure we have the wisdom of the past to deal with the problems of the present and the future. And we've been derelict about that.
Yeah, and I want to mention, and we're going to give Kelly a chance to talk about what she enjoyed reading, but really quick was in middle school, I read a lot of books about the threat of nuclear devastation in the classroom, short stories, as well as about the threat of like Orwellian, like authoritarian regimes. And I remember being very deeply depressed at such a young age to learn that nuclear devastation was possible. And I bring this up because I know there's been a lot of arguments about what books should be accepted or not. And I think like that one had a huge impact on me negatively, and it scared me. But it also I grew from it. I learned a lot, and so But anyway, Kelly, tell us about what you're reading now and what you enjoyed reading and what inspired you as a youth.
I'd love to. I also just want to say that our juniors right now in history are right in the moment talking about the Cold War. So that's ongoing, and I think we're pretty comprehensive in that, especially for our high school students. So that's positive. So I was a Nancy Drew Hardy Boys girl. Like, I
was a Hardy Boys guy.
Love me a good mystery, and I think it really made me curious and always kind of trying to figure things out. But lately, unfortunately, I read a lot of K-12 textbooks because that's just part of the job.
Sure,
but we've put a lot in place lately, and I think it's really important that we read them. We don't just rubber stamp them. So I spend a lot of time doing that. And I read a lot of scientific papers because that's just the nature of my work. But I've really kind of something of what Anthony said earlier. I've really become intellectually obsessed with the Inklings and the relationship between Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, and so I've actually gone back to reading The Hobbit. I read that when I was in high school,
sure,
but it didn't mean the same thing as it does now, right? And so you can really kind of appreciate the these underlying messages of just courage and doing something different, and being coming out of your shell and being uncomfortable, and so I just really appreciate the relationship that some of these writers
Sounds
have.
Great. The discussion continues with Dr. Kelly Piacsek and Anthony Zenobia, incumbent candidates for school board, as well as our guest professor Robert Kaufman, as This Week in Waukesha continues on WAUK 540 AM 101.1.
WAUK.
Gone in the years, but so I was. What's day, what's done, where small birds sang, and leaves were falling, where we once watched the robots landing on broad, majestic shore.
You're listening to This Week in Waukesha on WAUK 540 AM 101.1 FM. I'm your host, Don Brown. Johnny's on the board, and here in the office of former Alderman Don Paul Brown, our resident counsel, one of them, James Centel, has arrived, getting ready for his show, Morning Cannolis, that starts at 9. So always glad to have him. And my guests, of course, are school board incumbents, candidates for reelection, Kelly Piacsek and Anthony Zenobia. And I'm joined by Dr. Robert Kaufman of Pepperdine University. And been a great show so far. And one of our callers earlier, Susie, was talking about all the great things going on with our students in the schools. And I wanted to give a big congrats to the Waukesha South academic decathlon team that went to state on Thursday and Friday up in Green Bay. Haven't heard the results yet, but very proud of what they've accomplished so far and looking forward to hearing more great things about them. And it is St. Patrick's Day weekend, and everyone knows I love the Pogues, but I had to have, that was the Pogues' Broad Majestic Shannon. And we lost Shane McGowan last November 30th, but he lives forever in our hearts. And I know Bob holds him very dear. Actually, I don't know that. But another kind of a holiday for Civic Media, our parent company, our co-founder and CEO, Sage Weil, celebrating a birthday on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. And happy birthday to him, and thanks for his vision in bringing local radio really back at the most local levels, and really giving a lot of people an opportunity to focus on the things that are most important to us at the local level. So happy birthday, Sage, if you're listening. And so questions for our school board candidates. we had a question last week from a caller for last week's candidates, and so I wanted to include this, was parents' rights. Are they already in place, or what more needs to be done? And what kind of influence should parents have on curricular development? Who'd like to go first?
Sure, I'll be happy to kick it off.
Thanks, Kelly.
Are they already in place? Well, they are now. I think the question of, what policies and procedures did we already have on the books, and how were those actually being implemented, and how did parents feel about how those were being implemented, are all great discussion. But as I think what you're alluding to, the resolution that we passed last January was really based on 4 pieces, and that was our students being challenged is time well spent in the classroom, and that was one part of it. Are parents informed of what's going on? Are we protecting information associated with what students might be sharing? Are deeply held personal and family beliefs being respected in the school environment? And then are we collaborating with parents in terms of how students are being treated at school? And so a lot of people will say that, well, maybe that was all just happening the way everybody thought it was, but in fact, it wasn't. I have an example of a form that was handed out to middle and high school students in the fall of 2021, and the top of that form indicates, name, preferred name, pronouns, and then a checkbox of use my pronouns with my family, my peers, school admin, nobody. So here's a perfect example of where information is being collected from a student, and it's going to be used in the classroom, but there may be something there that the parents aren't aware of. And I think there's a lot of judgment potentially that's made by those professionals engaging with those kids that say, well, maybe the parent doesn't need to know, or maybe the parent isn't going to be responsive to this, but who gets to make that decision? And I think that's a really important one for me. When I kind of dug in on things that were happening at the district level, we discovered that the Gifted and Talented program funding had been cut. There was a district equity leadership team that had been put in place. Teachers were being told by administrators that they had to put anti-racist classroom signs on their doors. There was I remember very vividly in 2019, there was a Facebook post that was sponsored by the district that said teachers were announcing the creation of a GSA club in a middle school. And then in the summer of 2021, we had pride flags appeared in classrooms all over our high schools. So when you talk about parental rights, are they already in place? What we're talking about is transparency and awareness and understanding of what's being taught in the classroom, what the classroom environment is actually representing. And I think as at least I came into my position on the board, and what I experienced as a parent was that there were a lot of things happening that parents weren't aware of. And in my opinion, that's not okay.
Okay. Yeah, Anthony?
I think the biggest thing that I realized when I came into the job on the board was, everybody feels that parents have rights, but does the school board respect those rights and want to hear from parents? And does the administration do the same thing? And in a lot of cases, to some degree, Waukesha, but all over the country, that was not the case. School boards and administrations were not listening to parents. And when parents began to see the types of materials that were in the classrooms, that are in the libraries, it shocked them, because it is absolutely shocking and horrifying. Another big part of the parental rights resolution was the inappropriate materials that are obscene and pornographic that are in libraries as young. When a lot of people want to try to characterize this as, well, you're trying to ban books for high school kids in silence conversations. No, we're trying to prevent the sexualization of young children as young as kindergarten. And it's graphic and perverse, and it comes under this umbrella of a protected class, so that you can't say anything about it. You can't question it. You just have to accept it as parents that this is the way it is. And I think parents in Waukesha and all over this country that has begun to stood up, they're the people that got us elected to the school board. Amazing grassroots effort to get kids back to learning at all levels. The parental rights resolution was necessary for us to show parents we were serious and give good guidance to the administration.
Okay. So two questions I'll fire you quick. Do we have specific examples of those books that were deemed as perverse or pornographic? And then second question, it's more of a statement, was that, well, it is a question. A former constituent of mine that I admire very much, she had a call from middle school about her middle schooler, I forgot, 7th or 8th grade, he was not behaving in class.
Mm-hmm.
So she has a background in education, so she got permission from the principal's office, went in and sat next to her child at the school. So listen to what the teacher was teaching, making sure that the teacher was fine, but just making sure her son was behaving. And I guess after she left, she told me one of her son's friends said, "Your mom scares me." Do parents really know enough about some of the rights that are out there that they can take advantage of? Is that also part of the problem?
I think parents have started to become much more engaged. They've gotten into the actual school board policies that govern our actions and that guide the school board, guide administration. And we've had a great partnership with our administration. Our superintendent has wanted to work with us. He worked great with the old board. That board is completely turned over, and he works great with us. But yes, the materials that we're talking about, I know Kelly has a few actual examples that were removed from the libraries, but on the basic level of some of the books that were geared towards elementary school, these are books that graphically depict sex between children. Graphically depict. Okay. When you're talking about the more of the writing, the fiction that's not necessarily in pictures, because look, our kids aren't reading at that level. They have to be shown the images in order to understand the material, which is so damning for the type of stuff that's been snuck into our libraries. But I know Kelly's got a couple examples, which I don't think you could read on air.
Well, I think it's important to differentiate between, kids are going to hear or they're going to read an F-bomb here and there. The state of the world is that, it's just, it's inevitable, unfortunately. But this idea that there've been, massive books that have banned, I'm going to hand this to you, Don, while I'm talking, and just have you take a look at that first sentence on the left page and the last sentence on the right page. We looked at hundreds of books, and there were books that were raised as concerns, and the question is always, you're taking out, you're banning. Well, about 15 books that were at the middle school level were determined to be inappropriate for middle schoolers, went up to the high school level. And there were 6 books in 2022, and there were another 3 in 2023 that were removed. And I brought one of the books that was removed. It's called Jack of Hearts. It has nothing to do with education. There's no purpose in having that book in our library. I'm just curious what you thought of what you read.
Yeah, no, that certainly was something. It was alarming.
Are you surprised? Yeah. I mean, because I think what a lot of people, we try to convince people that this is just, that in aggregate it's a piece of literature, but in reality it's just a piece of pornography. There's.
I would have to dignify, what you said there, and I know Professor Kaufman's looking to chime in, and we have a caller, so go ahead, Bob.
I admire Kelly and Anthony because they're evidence of a pushback. What we're talking about is an example of us going astray. The parents pay the taxes. If you look at the history of education, the people rule. And we are not subjects, we're citizens. And we have an increasingly arrogant class of experts who abuse their expertise and exaggerate it. Telling parents what to do. This is particularly egregious in the school situation where it's supposed to be a local issue. And anything that reins in the so-called experts who are often wrong, this is, again, one of the unintended blessings of COVID, that it's motivated candidates like these to be proactive and restore us to an original, better vision of the proper relationship between the people and its government.
Sounds good. We have a caller on the line. Christina, what's on your mind?
Hi. I actually was calling about this parental rights resolution, and I apologize. I've got a cold right now, so my voice is a little off. But I did have questions. When the parental rights resolution was passed, I did not agree with it because I was concerned that it was basically going to swing the pendulum in too far of a direction where parents still weren't being heard. And I'm curious because I sent 5 or 6 emails to these two incumbents over the past couple of years about the parental rights resolution and what is being done to ensure that all parents are being heard. I have not received a response ever where I had said I would like to know if things are being censored in my children's curriculum and how that's being handled, because I have not heard or seen anything from these two board members.
Yeah, I'll take that one. I apologize if I haven't responded to your particular email. I have responded to an awful lot of emails from parents on this subject and others. I would just say, as far as the idea of censorship, just to kind of describe briefly the type of materials we're talking about, not only books in the library, but some of the books that are in classroom libraries, is if you would be okay if any parent would be okay if they wheeled a TV and a VCR into the classroom and began to show an X-rated movie. And I think the parental outrage would be high school. Yeah, that would be horrible. But as your kid gets younger, the more outraged every parent would be. And to say that would be some type of overstretch or overreaction, it's not at all. The books that I have seen are so dark and ugly and violent in so many ways. I can't even read most of them, and nor do I want to. So it's horrific and needs to be dealt with, and we're trying.
We're going to wind up this show continuing this discussion, especially about concept of inclusion in our public schools, with Anthony Zenobia and Kelly Piacsek, incumbent candidates for re-election. And that is the Waterboys with a fantastic cover of Van Morrison's Sweet Thing here on this St. Patrick's Day weekend. And both our guests, incumbent candidates, Anthony Zenobia and Kelly Piacsek, and Dr. Robert Kaufman, our moderator, if you will, or contributor from Pepperdine University, have all agreed on some non-conventional approaches to including faculty, people with great backgrounds. So when I make my case for teaching Irish and Irish American history in our schools, I hope you'll keep me in mind. And Bob, maybe you could create an opening for me there at Pepperdine. I don't think my family would mind relocating to those warm climes. So just planting the seed. So, so we were talking just about the parents' rights and also about the books being banned, and it leads to another conversation I want to have. Kind of this is the elephant in the living room, or the bigger question is. Critics of the school board say that the policies enacted in recent years have made certain students and faculty feel excluded. What is your reaction to these sentiments, and what do you feel should be an administration's role in promoting an inclusive school environment? And before you answer, I want to cite 2 examples here. I've been outspoken. I'm Catholic, raised in the Catholic tradition, and Kelly, as you may know, the Catholic Church's response to change is always take 2 aspirin and call me in 200 years. I learned recently there was a conference of Catholic bishops at St. Louis University earlier this month in which a group of more than a dozen U.S. bishops gathered for a private meeting at St. Louis University, a Catholic college. Actually, it was in January, I stand corrected, to listen to trans people and their families, as well as to theologians, medical professionals, and those in church industry. Second example, and again, I guess kind of the follow-up question on that too is like if the Catholic University or if the Catholic Church is kind of making an effort to try to attempt to be more inclusive, should our public schools not also be doing the same? Second point, and this is more metrics driven because we talk about the emphasis on STEM and on business. And here in town, we have Northwestern Mutual, which is them along with other companies have made significant investments in DEI initiatives. And I also learned recently an estimated 80% of U.S. employers have DEI initiatives underway. Recent DEI reports say that companies that promote DEI are 2.6 times more successful at retaining their workforce and 35% more productive. They're 65% more likely to meet or exceed sales goals, 70 to 80% more innovative than their competitors. And, sick rates, sick day rates are lower, insurance rates have decreased. And I guess the point I'm making is, the corporate world, which you would say probably leans more red, that's fair to say, more than a feel-good kumbaya thing, DEI is viewed as a smart business strategy. Do you feel public schools should adopt something from this playbook? So I know I've thrown a lot at you, but I wanted to give you a chance to respond to this. So
well, that's a lot. So I'm going to have to roll back a little bit to find the question.
So the original question was what, they said critics have said that recent policies have made certain students and faculty feel excluded. What's your reaction to these sentiments? And what do you feel is the administration's role in promoting an inclusive school environment?
Well, so let's, I think it's really important that we have an agreement on what inclusive means if you're going to start to have this conversation, right? Because for some people, inclusive means anything goes. And for other people, inclusive means really, truly inclusive, that everybody has, a right and respect for their opinion, their personal and deeply held beliefs, and that there's mutual respect and tolerance and understanding. In my opinion, good policy, good public policy, which is ultimately what we're talking about in a public school environment, is something that creates reasonable boundaries so that organizations can function well together with some rules of engagement, and that also allows for personal freedoms, right? We don't want to take anybody's rights away, right? So you have to balance that. And when you're dealing with minors, sometimes we have to remember that the rights of minors can be governed by the rights of parents. So that adds another layer of complexity. And so what we've done with implementation of a policy that's been on the books for actually 7 years, actually it's longer, it's older than that, but Waukesha adopted it then before our time, is actually implemented. What's the point of having a policy if you're not going to apply the policy? And I mentioned earlier, one of the challenges that we found when we started on the board were some of these questions between teachers and students that were secret. What can you tell me about yourself that you don't want me to share with your parents? Or, the flags in particular, but there were other things, signs, banners, and other things. So, for me, flags are things that unite people. People are united under flags, or flags mark territory. So if you go and put a flag up somewhere, you're either saying we're all united under this, or we're claiming this place. And I think that's divisive. I don't think that that's an inclusive strategy. And so I think that kind of ties back to what is the right balance of policy that says, people can have their freedom. And remember that we're talking about minors here, so parents have a say. And then also that there are appropriate rules in place that will govern the group.
Sounds good. I apologize, we're short on time. So Anthony, go ahead. We have 2 minutes.
Oh, okay. Well, this conversation and a lot of the stats and some of the examples you gave of DEI, this conversation always wants to bleed into how adults are treated and how we as a society respect the rights of other adults. And I'm all for personal liberty and freedom. I can't control what any parent does, what any adult does. But as adults, we do have a say and a right to speak to our minor children about the dangers of the world and what some of these things that we are interjecting into our schools has a negative connotation. And I really come back to sexualizing children. Sure. I just do not believe that we should put identities and sexual identities on kids before they have any understanding. Many of them before they hit puberty.
Terrific.
So we always have to separate that conversation.
Okay. Sounds good. Bob Kaufman, I got 10 seconds for you. 15.
Don, not for the first time. I disagree with everything you said. DEI is one of the worst things that we are experiencing. And Claudine Gay of Harvard and those university presidents are the Frankensteins of DEI. Martin Luther King is right. Judge people as individuals by the content of their character. Don't weaponize race.
Professor Robert Kaufman, incumbent candidates Anthony Zenobia and Dr. Kelly Piacsek, thanks